Okay, let's begin. Sorry I'm a little bit late. It was one of those disaster mornings where, as I was copying my file with all my pictures, all of a sudden it got destroyed, and so I had to try and recreate it at the last minute. So if I seem more confused today than usual, just cut me some slack. Before we start in today, though, I came across something. I told you that early on, I said the scientific method stuff that we talked about was always going to be among the most important things we would look at, because you have to be able to read articles critically, and usually it's that people they have superstitious beliefs or something, or they're not using the scientific method to try and figure out how the world works. But I came across an article yesterday, maybe you saw it, that I thought was interesting because it's an example of people using the scientific method, and then when they get results that disagree with what they think is the way the world is, they kind of go through the stop signs and ignore their results and say what they think is true about the world anyway. And it's pretty serious. The article was about binge drinking and pregnant women. And the headline said, "Binge drink / baby damage unclear. There is scant evidence that occasional binge drinking during pregnancy can harm the unborn child, say scientists, but they insist that pregnant women should follow advice to drink little or no alcohol." The Oxford University study, published in the Journal of Epidemiology and Community Health, did not find links between binging and birth defects. Blah, blah, blah. In recent years, the number of women who binge drink, defined as drinking 5 or more drinks at a single sitting, has grown rapidly, almost doubling in the 10 years since 1992. The government has urged women to avoid binge drinking completely during pregnancy, and the British Medical Association has gone a step further, suggesting that pregnant women should avoid alcohol altogether. The team from the National Perinatal Epidemiology Unit at Oxford University looked at hundreds of studies from across the world into alcohol during pregnancy and selected those that allowed them to see the effects of binge drinking as opposed to sustained heavy alcohol use. They found no convincing evidence that binge drinking could harm the fetus in any way. However, Dr. Ron Gray, the lead author, said that the research did not give women a license to drink during pregnancy, saying that future research could uncover evidence of harm. "I wouldn't want anybody to believe that on the basis of this report that it was safe to binge drink. We just don't know." Now, this is a tricky thing, right? Because everything inside of me and everyone else says it's a bad idea for me to stand here and tell you, actually, if you're pregnant, binge drinking is okay. Right? Because we all just know that that's wrong. Well, they've done a study. They've looked at hundreds of studies to try and figure out what is the link between binge drinking and birth defects. And the results of their study are that there aren't any. Now, that's crazy, right? But the lead author of the study then says, "I wouldn't want anybody to believe that on the basis of this report that it was safe to binge drink." So what does he want you to believe from the report? Like, I don't know, you could have had either belief before, so now he's done the study to figure out one way or another, and it came out this way, and he said, well, I don't want you to believe that. What else do we say? Mervi Jokinen of the Royal College of Midwives said, "The Royal College is deeply concerned that this study could imply that there is little substantive evidence that binge drinking while pregnant seriously harms a developing fetus." They're seriously concerned that this study would imply that there's no evidence. The study doesn't imply it at all. It demonstrates that there is no evidence. And they're deeply concerned. So it's a tricky issue, but you have to be able to read this and say, well, don't do the study if you're going to disavow the results. Question?
Are they afraid of being liable?
I think it could be something along those lines. More likely than not, though, I think it's just it's just not the way they want the world to be. Because people tend not to be liable. I don't know of any court cases where, because you published something in a peer-reviewed journal, that you were liable for someone then following the advice, because it's not meant to. They don't make advice. All they did was analyze the result. Question?
Isn't this just one study? You wouldn't need a couple more of that?
That typically is a good thing. If it's a really unexpected result, You want to replicate things. And so you might say, this study shows that there is no substantive evidence, however, blah, blah, blah. The reason this one is particularly egregious, though, is this is a study analyzing other studies. So it's not one study. It is a compendium of literally hundreds of studies. So lots of people have been doing it repeatedly, finding this, and now they've collected them all and say, well, let's really analyze when we can use lots of data. And so this is what they call a meta study, where they analyze lots of studies and they throw out the ones that they think there are reasons you shouldn't be able to use those data. And they still ended up with a lot of studies. So it's the kind of study that you want to actually place more weight in than just a single study. Because I agree with you. You do one study and you get something that's unexpected, you might say, well, you know, this is what the results said, but something about it makes us uneasy. Anyway, so that's a weird one. I mean, but you know, that's, as I said early on, remember the vanilla extract study, I said, you have to be prepared to change what you think about the world based on your results. Otherwise, you're not being rational. Okay, so let's continue what we were doing on Tuesday. We were talking about this. This was the overhead I put up where I said, we acknowledged that there was this physical difference between males and females. Primarily, we're talking about mammals here, but we're going to look at birds, insects, some other species. Because females produce a larger gamete, because in mammals we have gestation inside the female, because lactation can only be done by the females, we said those physical differences lead to differences in their biology. In other words, one sex invests more. We say they're going to be more choosy. The other sex invests less. Because they're giving less up, they're going to be more willing to take the mating opportunities, but they're going to have to compete with each other. So another way of looking at this would be this. You could say this, that the physical differences in reproductive investment, sometimes you'll hear these described as constraints, just because they're non-negotiable. They can't be changed. But we expect them to lead to physical and behavioral differences. And in females, since they're primarily making greater initial investment, we're going to see choosiness. And in males, we're going to see competition with each other for access to females. I want to introduce two terms that I'm going to use a lot today, anti-philandry, anti-cuckoldry. These get used a lot in the biological literature. Philandry describes a situation when males cheat. And by that I mean male and female. The female believes that there's some sort of pair bond. She's going to get some investment. But the male gives his investment to someone else. Cuckoldry is going to be on the flip side when females cheat. So this is sort of the pinnacle of cuckoldry, is where the male is actually taking care of the offspring and believes that they are his. I guess he doesn't actually have to believe if we're talking about, you know, a species of bird, but he has to behave as if he believes that they are his. But genetically they are not, and so all that investment is lost. So that would be cuckoldry. And so as a result of these differences between the males and females in how they're built, they're vulnerable in different ways. The female is never vulnerable to the extent that she's going to take care of an offspring that isn't hers, in the case of mammals, because she gives birth to it, she knows that it's hers. So that's not a risk for her. For males, that's a huge risk. On the other hand, a male is never going to be vulnerable in that he's made a huge investment and then she deserts him without making any of the investment at all, because she has to make the investment. So we see these differences. And we can describe them in the context of anti-philandry tactics that evolve. So in females, we expect them to evolve methods of reducing their risk of philandry. So philandry is when the male cheats. In other words, it's when he gets reproductive success without contributing his full share of the effort. And so we expect females to evolve methods to avoid that. So I talked about a whole list of these last time right at the end. Remember, we said we're going to expect females to demand honest signals of health, status. So that was something like this. In the frigate bird, the male can only produce this giant red pouch if he's pretty healthy. It takes a lot of energy. He cannot have a high parasite load. It's very difficult to do. Also, the fact that he's got this big red pouch and he's still alive also attests to the fact he must be pretty good. That's a big target, so it's a real handicap. And for him to still be alive, those are all signals that say this guy is a healthy, good bet. So what else do we have? These are two dung beetles, males that are fighting with each other. Frequently the female, in order to assess, is she getting a male who is relatively high quality because she wants the good genes, she will wait and see who wins the battle. These dung beetles, they sit on little piles of feces that come from other animals, and the males will battle with each other, and she usually will sit off to the side. It can get pretty disgusting as they fight on these dung balls because sometimes they're really squishy, and the males will die. They'll get trapped in it. But generally what happens is that she sits there and she waits to see which male is still on the ball at the end, and she will mate with him. We looked at this. I said ponies. In horses, you have lots of males battling with the females waiting to see who wins the battle. Some bison, the rams that we looked at here. We've also got things not just fighting ability, but size. Size itself can be an indicator of male value, and so it's believed that there should be some selection for bigger and bigger and bigger males. That's why in the case of elephant seals, you get these really, really large males. In this picture here, the males are in the blue sweatshirts, females are in the white sweatshirts. They are ranked according to height, and so you see the little distribution of how many there are, and you can see here that males, on average, are taller. We know that, but you probably never thought about that in terms of this selection for anti-philandry, that females are selecting for the best males. There is some value to being large. Nuptial gifts we talked about. We talked about the grebes with their long courtship. We had talked about the signs that they're going to invest. This one's the bush cricket. Do you remember this from Mean Genes? I would say of all the data that we wrote in Mean Genes, this is the one that I remember probably the most. I think it was the most surprising to me when I looked at it. This is the case where when the female mates with the male, his actual ejaculation, which contains all sorts of nutrients, causes him to lose a third of his body weight. So if we were talking about humans, hypothetically, 180-pound male is going to lose 60 pounds when he has sex. Now think about that. It's not just some bizarre random fact about this species. It tells us a huge amount. What's going on here then? If you are a male in this species, are you going to mate indiscriminately? No, a bad choice. You choose a female who's unhealthy and isn't going to make it, or something like that. How many times do you get to mate? 3 times, right? And you go down to 0. Yeah, I think probably less than 3 times, but not very much. This is an interesting case. I kept saying we're talking about mammals where the females have this constraint where they have to make a big investment. This is a different species where I'm giving you an example of a constraint where the way they've evolved is that the males have to make a huge investment. And so you can imagine then every aspect about their biology. Do you think the males are being really, really picky about who they're going to choose? Yes. And so if you're in this species, the males get a chance to see what it's like to be a female mammal. that suddenly they're very, very vulnerable every time they mate. So the bush cricket, they're not alone. There's some species of butterflies as well that lose about a third of their body weight every time they mate. But in any case, when you get a huge investment up front, the females do, then their risk is less. The male can go away because she's already gotten the investment from him. Okay, so then, sorry, I told you my slides are going to be in almost random order, disastrously. This is our first take-home message, though. It's just sort of a recap from last time. Female initial reproductive investment is higher. In that case, I didn't say in mammals, because clearly if we were talking about bush crickets, it's not the case. But in mammals, because female initial reproductive investment's higher, they're vulnerable. And so we expect the evolution of choosiness, demands for investment, and a variety of other anti-philandry tactics. All right, sadly, my slides are all in exactly the reverse order I want them to be in. All right, well, let's look at the flip side now and what's going on with males. We've said in our two sex rule predictions that the lower your investment is, the more there's going to be competition and a need for paternity certainty. In other words, because choose which one is the best, and if they're choosing which one is the best, the males are going to compete with each other to try and demonstrate that they are the best. And then once they've done that, if they are going to make any investment, they want to make sure that they are the parents. So we're going to see lots of selection for mechanisms of increasing their paternity certainty. And so first thing we'll see is there's going to be competition for access. So we saw all that, the males fighting. That's just the flip side. The females are trying to decide who wins the battles, who is the dominant elephant seal. And the males oblige. They have their battles, and they try to win to see which of them can actually become the male that gets most access. We also expect to see what we call mate guarding. Now, mate guarding is the case, let me skip all the way ahead to, in the case of frogs, they have something called amplexus. When they mate, it's not quite mate guarding, but it's extended mating. When they mate, the male just holds on to the back of the female. When she lays her eggs, he's going to fertilize them. And what happens is they'll stay hooked together like this for several months. Given their lifespan, this would be the equivalent of humans staying coupled together in the act of sex for about 10 years. And so that's a pretty extreme behavioral adaptation of the male in order to make sure that he gets to be the parent of the eggs. Once she lays the eggs and he fertilizes them, though, he then is likely to stay around to protect them from predation and to try and make sure that they develop into new frogs because he knows that they're his. So that's it's called amplexus, and that's why in nature it's very easy to see frogs like this. The female just goes about her business too. She goes looking for food. She sleeps at night. She engages in social interactions with other individuals, and he just holds on. What else? So you can get lots of pictures. Sorry, this one's kind of disgusting. Sorry. Houseflies stay together for about an hour when they mate. Same thing, it doesn't take that long for them to transfer sperm. They stay together because the entire time they're together, she can't be mating with another male. In the case of moths, they'll stay hooked together for 24 hours. And again, they have relatively short lives, so this is the equivalent of staying together for a long time. Humans as well have situations of mate guarding. The example I think of all the time is my friend Judith, who I told you about. She did that casual sex study. She also, though, she was in graduate school at Harvard while I was there, and she and Terry Burnham and I were friends, and we'd go out a lot, and we'd go to parties or this or that, and she would always, at around 11 o'clock, she'd disappear from these parties. We're like, oh, what's going on? She's like, I'm going home. And we're like, really? It's kind of early. She's like, yeah. And she had this boyfriend, Mark. And so we were living in Boston. Mark lived in Washington, Seattle somewhere. She's like, yeah, Mark likes to talk to me. Every night he calls me at 11 o'clock. And, it's really nice. He's a romantic guy, and we just talk. And I'm thinking, talk? He's sitting on you so that you can't go to a party. And he would do this all the time. And she never saw that what he was doing was making her leave rooms where there were lots of men who maybe were going to be interested in her. Or I think of this other example. Terry had a party once, and this one friend of his was there with his girlfriend. And I noticed that at the party, at one point, I met the girlfriend. And so I'm talking to her. And all of a sudden, this guy comes out of nowhere. And all of a sudden, he's standing there, too. Hey, what's up? And I'm like, nothing, we're just talking. And then later in the party, maybe an hour later, we happen to be together again. I start talking, and bang, he comes over again. I didn't even know what his name was, so I asked Harry, I'm like, who's this mate guarder? And that's what we call him. He's just the mate guarder, because anytime there was a guy who was anywhere near his female, he wanted to come over just to make sure, and he wasn't saying anything specifically, but that was the effect, was that he was going to make sure that nothing happened. I have another friend, Catherine, we were in school together, and I'll give you a sense of dumb biologist jokes that we like to make. Anyway, I had written to her while we were writing Mean Genes, asking if she could find a reference for me about systems where multiple females were mated with one male. But anyway, she had just gotten married to a guy named Walt. I had set them up, so I was very happy that I set them up, and it worked out as a marriage. Hi, Jay, here's a reference about mate guarding in birds, blah, blah, blah. You know I'm pregnant, right? All I can say is that after we had sex, Walt just sat on me nonstop until the pregnancy was confirmed. I'm worried that the child might have kind of a flat face, but at least we know it's Walt's. Catherine. Anyway, she's just kidding, but do you know situations in your own life where you see mate guarding? Do any of you get mate guarded ever? Give me an example of mate guarding.
Females mate guard.
Well, yeah, remember I talked about this last time, that I said humans were a little bit off on the general mammalian pattern, because we have what appears to be males competing for access to females, as well as females competing for access to males. So yeah, you can give it to me either way. Do you mate guard your guy? And how do you do it? What are some of your methods?
Oh, well, I never get off of him.
Okay, yeah, you should let him up. He looks like he's turning blue under the...
No, yeah, at parties, I'm definitely, attached to him.
Yeah, you just create situations where it's difficult for situations that are going to be bad to come up. What are other classic situations of mate guarding? Class rings, yeah. So you give your class ring to your girlfriend. She's wearing it around her neck. And it's viewed as really romantic, right? Or she's wearing your varsity jacket. That is a signal to other guys that says, stay away from her. Chastity belts. Not as common these days or in other species. But all right, I could go with that. Yes, Winona Forever. Do you remember that? That was Johnny Depp's tattoo. Now it says Wino Forever. Yes. Yeah, tattoo is a good one. promise ring as well. It says, I'm not even willing to actually make the commitment of marrying you, but I want to leave the option open. And in the meantime, I want to make sure that nobody else gets you. Yeah, what else? What else?
MySpace comments.
MySpace comments, very good. Yes, a public forum that says, you know, we have hooked up, or whatever. No, it says that on Facebook, right? Okay, so you've got all these things, and I mean, I'm sorry to break the news to you that all they are is about anti-cuckoldry, but we see it across the animal kingdom, and the important thing is we see it in situations where the males are making less investment and they've got this lack of paternity certainty. We've also got this whole issue of something called sperm competition. Now, so in the case of fruit flies, it was discovered that a significant percentage of the sperm that they produced was unable to fertilize eggs. This is a big deal because sperm are produced as gametes. They are supposed to fertilize the eggs, and some researchers made a discovery relatively recently. In the last 15, 20 years, a lot of work has been done on this, where they discovered that a significant percentage, and it differs a lot across species, but a huge percentage of the sperm, some will say even a majority, others have said even up to 90%, can't fertilize the egg, but what they do is if they're a sperm from another male, they kill them. Or they hook together and they make these little, what they're called blockers. So they have blockers that all link together and they block other sperm from getting to the egg. There are things called anti-sperm. Those are the ones that seek out the other sperm and kill them. And in general, there is the idea of sperm competition that if there is a chance that a female is going to mate with multiple males, then if you're a male, what's the best strategy? First of all, you can sit on her so she can't mate with other males. But let's say she's going to. Let's say that's not practical. Then how many sperm does it take to fertilize her? Just one. But if you produce one and she mates with 10 other males, suddenly your odds of being the sperm that fertilizes the egg are relatively low. So you could produce maybe, what if everyone else is producing one sperm, you produce 100. So now the odds are you're going to win. But natural selection is going to be acting on all the males such that they're like, well, I'm going to produce 1,000 sperm. Otherwise, I'm going to produce 1,000,000 sperm. And what happens is you end up with, in species where there is a likelihood that the females are mating with multiple males, you get huge amounts of sperm being produced by males and females. And we wrote about this in Mean Genes that in the case of gorillas, all the females mate with one male. They choose the dominant male and they mate with him. They don't mate with anyone else. How many sperm does he have to produce? Very few. And so the prediction these biologists made was, wow, we would expect sperm production in gorillas to be really, really, really low. In the case of chimps, females mate with lots and lots of males. And I don't have the data here, but we write about it in Mean Genes. Jane Goodall had written about it where she said, and she talked about individual female chimps, but they'll mate with 3 or 4 or 5 different males before lunch. They take a break, then in the afternoon they'll mate with 2 or 3 additional males. Then in the evening, they'll mate with multiple additional males. Now what would you expect sperm production in chimps relative to gorillas? It's got to be a lot higher. And so this is why the next picture, the grossest picture I'm going to show you, the whole quarter. So if you want to close your eyes, you can. It's not gross when you look at it. It's only gross when I tell you it. On the top is a chimp brain. On the bottom is one chimp testicle. And so this is really unusual in the animal kingdom because there's been such strong sperm selection, sperm competition, that the males are producing huge amounts. But what's interesting is that this was a prediction that the biologists made beforehand. They said, we know a lot about their behavior. We would expect their physiology now to respond this way. And it led to a whole line of, aha, the more different males that a female mates with, the greater the sperm production we would expect. That's why immediately people thought, well, what do humans look like? Because we have gorillas where the males have tiny testes. And that indicates, the females are all mating with the same male. They're not mating with multiple males. So people say, well, if humans truly are monogamous, then you would expect testes size to be relatively small compared to body size. And in the little continuum, gorillas are way over here at the low end. Chimps are way over here at the high end. Humans are right in the middle. And so they are 4 times bigger than the gorilla testes as a proportion of body size, but they're only a quarter as big as the chimps. So it gives you a little bit of insight, what has been our evolutionary history, and it's not one of perfect monogamy. There are also additional strategies, things like in spiders, they produce something called copulatory plugs. And in the case of something like a black widow, they actually break off. It's not really a penis, but it's analogous to it. It breaks off in the female after they mate. This is bad news for the male, right? He cannot mate again with anyone else. However, the female can't either. And so what they do is they mate this one time, and he is certain then that she is not going to mate with any additional males. Typically, she will eat him afterwards as well. He doesn't want to get eaten and tries not to, but she eats him, and it benefits her because her reproductive success tends to be limited by resources. So she has a big meal after she's eaten him. She tends to produce more eggs, and they are healthier. It also helps him as well, right? He's not going to mate again, and his offspring get off to a better start than they would have otherwise. Yes, this is the damselfly, and the phrase we used was shovel penis. In the case of insects, there's been the evolution of a whole variety of different genital morphologies, some of them really crazy, but in the case of this damselfly, it looks like a shovel, and before they mate, they will scoop out any sperm that are inside the female, and then they will mate. And so it's this elaborate behavior because what they want to do is increase the likelihood that they are the father. In the case of sharks, what they'll do, we've got a hammerhead shark. There's some good data on them. They will inject various types of spermicides into the female first to kill off all the other sperm. In some cases, if they don't produce the spermicides, what they will do is they will inject just seawater into her to wash out her insides, reducing the probability that any of her eggs are fertilized by another male. And so you've got this whole range of different strategies that have gone on in these species, in a variety of species, that increase the likelihood that the male is going to be the father of some offspring. Sorry, I had numbered the take-home messages wrong. I wanted to squeeze this one in, so it's number 1.5. So it's just the flip side. We talked about females and the anti-philandry tactics. These are the anti-cuckoldry tactics. So because reproductive investment initially is low, and because paternity certainty is low, leads to male-male competition, leads to indiscriminate male mating, leads to mate guarding, and leads to sperm wars. Sperm wars encompassing all the ways that a male might try and remove the sperm of another individual, might preclude the female from mating ever again, or if she does, might increase the odds that one of his sperm fertilize the egg. So I could ask you then a question just based on this. The reason I like all the things we're talking about, why I find them interesting, is that they generate lots of predictions. These are theories that are grounded in physical differences between males and females, but they allow us to make predictions about situations we don't know about, and that's when science is powerful. I could ask you this question. I did once on an exam. I said, among mammals, why do males exhibit more mate guarding than females? And I could then say, under what conditions would this not be the case? And give me an example. Yeah. So think about why that might be. The first obvious part, why males exhibit more mate guarding. Why would a female in most mammalian species not have to guard her mate? Because she knows that the offspring she's going to give birth to are hers. So she doesn't have to keep an eye on the guy at all. That's not going to help her. Okay, I want to move to the next topic on our outline today, which is related to this. We're going to see that it's tied in pretty closely. And it's the question of mating systems. When we talk about mating systems, we think of them in terms of, are species monogamous or are they polygamous? But we'll see that we can divide mating systems up into even more than that. Monogamous, just where you've got one male and one female together. Polygamous, where you've got one of one sex and more than one of the other sex. We can actually break that down into two. One is called polygyny, where you've got one male with multiple females. And the way we're going to define these, though, is a little odd. You can think of it in terms of what I've written in green. One male bonds with multiple females, and even the word bonds we're using it very loosely because elephant seals are polygynous. You pronounce that word polygyny. So you've got one male, maybe it'd be better to say mates with multiple females, but in a lot of situations there actually is some bonding. But the way we define it is this. You look at the variance in reproductive success among males. So we talked about how to calculate that last time, or not how to calculate it, but what it means. So if it's high among males, in other words, there are some champion males, the king male who gets all the matings, and there are a lot who get none, that's high variance. So if you've got high variance, and then female, it's low variance. All females tend to mate with one male. So when you do that division, the variance in males divided by the variance in females, it's a big number. That's polygyny. So I have to go all the way back. No. All right, so we've got our elephant seals. They are the classic example of polygyny. Polygyny, though, tends to be true in almost all mammals. So I want you to think about why would that be the case, that in almost all mammals we have polygyny, one male with lots of females. The other polygamous mating system is going to be this. It's called polyandry. Low variance in male reproductive success, and high variance in female reproductive success. So when I say high female variance, what would that mean? That means that some females aren't getting any matings, and a few females, the top females, are getting lots of matings. So one female bonds with multiple males. Multiple males are choosing the same female. So whereas polygyny, I can say almost all mammals. When it comes to polyandry, there are almost no examples of it in the world. There are some. There are some birds called sage grouse. I don't even have a picture of them. Do ants and bees count? Yeah, interesting one. People tend not to talk about it that way, where you've got one reproductive individual. But that's a good one because, yeah, you've got an individual female, and she tends to mate with one or multiple. And so that could be either monogamous or polyandrous. That's a good one. Monogamy is the case. There's low variance in both. Because if you have one male bonded with one female, that means if there's a 50-50 sex ratio, all the males find a mate, and all the females find a mate. These are just some baboons that are another polygynous species. Lots of females mate with one male. These are olive baboons, different species, same thing. Multiple females mate with one male. Then when we get to the case of birds, most bird species are monogamous. So here we have a male and female. You can't even tell them apart. Penguins as well. Pretty monogamous. You get one female bonding with one male. You get low variance in reproductive success among males, low variance in reproductive success among females. What else do we have? There are some species of mammals, some Arctic foxes we see monogamy in, but it's really rare. Finally, the last one that tends to get included in descriptions of mating systems is promiscuity, where you have low variance on both, on the males and females. Everybody gets a mating, but where you tend not to have any bonding between individuals, and so you have lots of individuals mating with lots of other individuals. Classic example of this would be this bonobos. Have you heard of bonobos? I'm sure you have. It's hard to watch now any nature show and not see a show on bonobos. Bonobos are kind of the poster child for promiscuous species, that they have really active sex lives. You'll have every possible combination. They seem to have sex even in situations where it's unlikely that it's going to result in reproduction. They have young individuals mate with older individuals. You get male-male combinations, female-female combinations. It's one of the few species where you'll see individuals doing things just to pleasure themselves as well. The first time I saw videotape of bonobos, I've never seen them in the wild, but they were going at it so enthusiastically. The female fell out of a tree, probably 20 feet, and just whacks onto the ground. She kind of dusts herself off, gets out, goes back up to the top of the tree, and so they're famous for just having very active sex lives. Question?
I'm not sure about this, but I thought maybe dolphins were the only other mammals that showed that they enjoy sex.
Well, I would say that all species enjoy sex. It's hard, enjoy is a weird anthropomorphic thing. I would define it as revealed preference, things that the individuals repeatedly do, they enjoy. But in terms of doing it in situations where reproduction is unlikely to result, bonobos do, humans, dolphins do, I know. It wouldn't surprise me if we find other species, but I think they're a good case of another one, yeah. And I don't know if that indicates, additional intelligence or what, but all right. So I want to use our theory to make some predictions. Sexual dimorphism is considered a good predictor of mating systems. Why would this be? Let me see what other pictures I have here. So here are the case of the red deer. They are sexually dimorphic. What do I mean by dimorphic? Morph meaning shape. Di meaning two, sexually, males and females. The males and females don't look the same. So the question would be, why is it that in some species they are monomorphic? The males and females look the same. I showed you the picture of those birds, and you cannot tell them apart. On the other hand, here it's very obvious. The male's got the big antlers. So here are a couple of couples of birds. They are, I think they're called blue-footed boobies. And so on the left, that's a male and female. On the right side, that's a male and female. And they've got little territories that they're marking off, and they've come to the edge to say, hey, this is the property line. The interesting thing to me, though, is that you look at them, and which one's the male and which one's the female? Who knows? You look at the birds on campus, the pigeons. Pigeons are monogamous. They tend to mate for their entire life. You can study pigeons for ages, and you cannot tell the males from the females. Many biologists have to wait until the birds they're studying die, then they cut them open, then they can see, this was a male or this was a female. That would be the extreme of sexual monomorphism. So now the question is, why would sexual dimorphism be considered a very good predictor of mating systems? In other words, the more sexually dimorphic you are, the more polygynous your mating system is. I want you to think about this. Come up with an answer. Why is it that we see sexual dimorphism when they're polygynous? Elephant seal females are about half the size of the males. How did that happen? Yeah.
Well, because if the female only gets to make once, then they want more true signs of health and like better signs of male superiority over other males.
So there's directional selection, like we selected for starvation resistance in fruit flies early on. Yeah, the females are doing a little experiment in males. They're doing selection for increased size, or selection for increased antler size, or selection for a big red pouch. All of those things, if the males are competing amongst themselves for access to the females and the females are exerting choice, whatever the females are choosing based on, since they tend to all choose the best males, there's strong selection. So another way of saying this, that the more asymmetrical the investment is, the more radical the dimorphism is, because the sex that is not making much of an investment, they're just sitting around competing with each other, hoping that they get picked, or hoping that through luck of the draw, their genetics are good. So if females are exerting choice, the male physical appearance or behavioral appearance is going to change. When investment is more equal, then, if you're monogamous, every male gets chosen, every female gets chosen by someone. And so being a little bit bigger or having a little bit brighter tail feathers does you no good, so it's not worth making the investment. That's why they end up looking exactly the same. So if you are the pigeon, if you're a male pigeon, and for some reason you develop some really flashy colors, you still get to mate with one female, and that's it. But there's a cost to having the flashy feathers, right? You're more likely to die, so they don't have them. What does that tell us about humans? Is it evidence that we are more polygynous or monogamous? Right? Do we have flashy tail feathers? No. Yes? No? You seem divided, really? No, we don't even have tails or feathers.
But we look really different.
But we look really different. Yeah? Such as?
Males are bigger on average.
Males are bigger on average. That's it. Right there, if you look at a species, males are bigger on average, that means that the females like big. And if the females like big rather than just everybody gets someone, that's it. Yeah, you're right. So that's it. You could go on and you could say, yeah, males have deeper voices as well, which turns out to be correlated with reproductive success. You could say they've got hairier bodies, or there's all sorts of things where you could say they are sexually dimorphic. We don't know how it ties into female choice, but we know that it means that polygyny is going on to some extent. All right, here's a question then. I told you that almost all birds are monogamous and almost all mammals are polygynous. Why is there more monogamy in birds? I've given you some examples, the frigate bird with the big red pouch, the peacock, but those are exceptions. The vast, vast majority, 90% of all birds are monogamous. Why do you think that's true? Yes, exactly. Unlike mammals, we have a couple of differences in their biology. First of all, in mammals, we have internal gestation. The female is pregnant and the male cannot help out. In the case of birds, after fertilization, relatively soon after, she lays an egg. You have to protect the egg and you have to keep it warm, but she can sit on it or he can sit on it. So we've removed the constraint, that underlying biological difference, and we've said, hey, guess what? You're both just as good at taking care of them. And so he does. And so when that's the case, suddenly there's less asymmetry in investment. They're both investing a lot. There's one other huge difference between mammals and birds. Birds don't lactate. Mammals lactate. And what that means is that this other huge feature of mammals that causes females to invest more, in the birds it's not there. How do the offspring grow? They eat food. Who feeds them the food? Both of them, mother or the father. For that reason, because you don't have that constraint, it turns out they can both take care of the offspring. And when that's the case, then you end up with lots of monogamy. How about this? There are some species, fish, for instance. Most of them have external fertilization. Female lays the eggs. Male dumps a load of sperm on them. They get fertilized, then they develop. Do you expect more monogamy than mammals or less monogamy than in mammals? Let's think about this. External fertilization, what are going to be the implications of that as compared to mammals? What? Less opportunity cost? How's that? Okay, so there's no internal gestation and there's no lactation, so she's making less investment. All right, so that's less asymmetry, so that would slant us towards monogamy. What else? Are you raising your hand? You are. Give me something else. Come on. A difference between fish and mammals. A big feature among mammals is paternity uncertainty. Do you think that the male is more or less sure than a human male is that the offspring are his? Yes. He sees the eggs there, she's laid them, he fertilizes them. So because we don't have internal gestation, we've got more paternity certainty. As soon as you have more paternity certainty, what does that do to the male's desire or ability to take care of the eggs, the offspring? It goes up. And so when you change these aspects of their biology, you get changes in how much investment the males can make. And as you get closer to 50-50, then you tend to see monogamy. Are there conditions where we'd see total sex reversals? I don't mean an example. I mean, what would the biological conditions have to be? Okay, if they had a uterus, or just some aspect of the male that caused him to be the one who had to keep the offspring while they were developing. There was just another species of birds. You look at the birds, you cannot tell them apart, the males and the females. Let's see, mammals. It's just an example that the males and females are all different. Sorry, I'm trying to find the case. So here's our external fertilization. You do get situations. You would think that there'd be perfect paternity certainty in the fish, but there's not, because you do have the situations where the males battle now for territories because the female still wants a male who has good genes. But so you'll get these big males guarding a territory. She lays eggs, and you get these little tiny males, and they sneak in and they fertilize the eggs before he notices that she has laid them. So there still is a little bit of paternity uncertainty. Okay, so here's a case of a species called the giant water bug. Now, what happens here is that the male, unlike the female, he's got this very flat shell on the back, And she produces this really glue-like cement substance that as she lays, she mates with the male, and as she lays the eggs, one by one, she takes them and she glues them to the shell. She can't carry them around this way. She's not designed that way. He's designed, so he's got the little thing, the flat surface. Now he has to keep them from getting eaten. He has to keep them moist so they don't dry out. All of the investment, or not all of it, but a huge portion of the investment is done by the male. So what's going to go on now? Is he going to be indiscriminately mating? No. If he makes a bad choice, he's got the eggs of some low status, low quality, sick female glued to his shell, and there's no room for others. So we expect him to be really choosy. What would be another example? We talked about one. What's that? The bush cricket, exactly. You're built so that when you try to fertilize a female, you lose a third of your body weight. So they are built such that their gamete is produced along with some nutritious material that she consumes. So when that's the case, we expect there to be almost a role reversal, or at least swings the pendulum back. Seahorses are an example that the males have this little pouch, and there's a lot of debate how much of a sex role reversal they have. But right after birth, they will mate with each other, and after birth, the female takes the offspring and she puts them into the pouch of the male. And then they stay there, and he takes care of them. It looks like she now comes back and visits on a pretty regular basis. Every day she'll come back. She'll even bring him some food occasionally. But because of this physical difference that he has a pouch that they can carry the offspring in, he does a lot of the investment. When he does a lot of the investment, we would expect the males to be choosier. We would expect females to mate indiscriminately, and they do. So these are all interesting predictions because they tell us, okay, the mating system that we see, the sexual dimorphism that we see, all result from features of their underlying reproductive biology. Now, I don't have it. Here's a question then that I want to pose to you. So it's called sexual selection. Remember, we talked about this a long time ago, but to refresh your memory, sexual selection is when you have natural selection operating, but it's just operating to change one of the sexes rather than the other. So males becoming bigger would be called sexual selection, or males developing flashy tail feathers in the peacock, that would be sexual selection. Any of those features are. So here's a question for you. Could you say that sexual selection can help us understand why not that many women run for political office? This seems like a stretch. What's the logic that underlies it? Yeah, if you are, let's think about, who do you think is the highest status female or the most powerful female in the U.S.? Probably Condoleezza Rice, I would guess. Madeleine Albright. Who else did you say? Oprah as well. That's actually true. If you write a book, when she was doing her book club, if she chose your book for Oprah's book club, they immediately would do a printing of 1.2 million copies. So all she has to do is decide that she likes your book, and you make lots of money. So she's very powerful. Condoleezza Rice, I always think in terms of like Madeleine Albright, because for a lot of years she was really on that political stage. If you're the highest status female in the country, do all the guys want to mate with you? No. You don't have to be so vigorous about that. Typically not. There's not a huge payoff. If you are a monogamous to polygynous species, there's not a huge payoff. On the other hand, let's think in terms first of elephant seals, not humans. If you're the top male, remember the top 4% get 85% of the mating. Strong selection to become high status. In the case of mammals, humans, we know based on the testes size and the dimorphism that we see that there's a little bit of polygyny going on. There is some benefit to being the higher status male. So going into politics is something that is lots of work in order to get status. Question?
So the males are higher status because they have an appearance that makes them higher status. If Oprah and Condoleezza Rice were banging hotties, I'm sure a lot of guys would want them in addition to their, to their status.
Yes, absolutely. But whether it would be at a more extreme than someone who was not famous but equally attractive seems unlikely. So the question then is this. It's not just something like political office. Think about another situation. One of the situations that's been written about from a biological perspective has to do with law firms. Law firms, lots of you want to become lawyers. Law firms tend not to have female partners. And this is considered a real problem because it looks like somehow there's discrimination going on. Female, the way it works is you get hired out of law school as a junior associate for a lot of money, but you work for about 7, maybe 8 years, and then they decide yes or no whether they want you as a partner. If you're a partner, you share in the profits. You tend to make a lot of money. At the biggest law firms in LA, the average salary of a partner is $640,000 a year. Huge amounts of money. You have to work tremendous numbers of hours. It's huge amounts of work. So anyway, the issue is, in these law firms, almost all the partners are male. And so people have complained. They say this is evidence of discrimination. Upon further investigation, it's been discovered that the law firms are hiring significantly more females as the first-year associates. So then the thought was, aha, they're not being promoted at the same rate. Turns out they're being promoted at the same rate or higher. So what was the conclusion that they made? Females leave the big law firms because they don't want the job. They do it for a few years, they like it, it's good, and then for them, there's the trade-off for huge amounts of money and status in exchange for 70, 80-hour work weeks is not worth it. And so try as they want, the law firms are having a hard time doing that because they're offering something that is not particularly valuable. Whereas if you're a male, the thought of working all those hours when it translates into status is something that people can understand from a biological perspective. So it's just, I want this as food for thought, why it might be difficult in certain situations to try and entice females with status, different from trying to entice males to do things with status, because it can tell you why certain social problems that we have, and I think it is a problem that we don't have equity among males and females in these law firms, but why it's a problem. Question?
Does a female's testosterone level have any effect on her success or desire to succeed?
Good question. The question was, does a female's testosterone level have any effect on her desire to succeed or her actual success? Unclear. People have tried to look at it. There's a lot of variance in female testosterone levels, and it doesn't seem to strongly correlate with anything. It is related a little bit to sex drive. It's related a little bit to physical features such as how pronounced the jawline is. So you do see a physical manifestation. I would expect that you would see it, but I've never seen any good studies that show it, so I don't know. All right, I'm not going to say this is the answer to this question, but ponder that the biology and the constraints we have might be related to why it's not so easy to just turn our system around. So I'll stop here. I'll see you on Tuesday. Have a good weekend.